Hey everybody, welcome to Figuring It Out. I'm really excited to share this episode with you all because I got to interview my little cousin Matthew. You all might know him better as the one teaching you how to master your favorite West Indian recipes on his YouTube channel, Matthew's Guyanese Cooking. So let's hear from Matthew about how he got started.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew. I am a student right now and I am also continuing my YouTube channel and just trying to spread my Guyanese culture and food with the rest of the world.
Awesome. So what is, for people who haven't seen your YouTube channel, if they look at Matthew's Guyanese Cooking, what will they find right now?
So obviously you're going to find a lot of Guyanese recipes, a lot of the traditional foods that like your grandparents would have made for you growing up. I also do focus a little bit on the religious aspect of my family's like traditions, and so you can find all of that on my channel.
Where did you first pick up cooking?
So I think when I was younger, I was always in the kitchen behind my grandmother. She loves to cook and she makes really good food in my opinion. Everybody's grandmother makes good food, they say.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always behind her. If there was a chance to play with my cousins or be in the kitchen with her, I was always in the kitchen with her. So I think that's where that stems from.
Nice. What is your favorite thing that your grandma makes?
My favorite thing, ever since I was a little kid, it's always been pumpkin and roti. It's very simple, but I feel like it's just like the best.
Yeah. And I guess one thing that we haven't really mentioned that we probably should before we get into the rest of the episode is Matthew's actually my first cousin. So your grandma is my aunt, and I can definitely attest to all she does cooking is probably some of the best ever. But it's not just your grandma that cooks a lot, right? I think in our whole family, we come from a family where food is very important. I think either way, our culture, food is very important, but especially in our home, it wasn't just your grandma, but I think our grandparents definitely made cooking really important, especially my paternal grandpa, your great-grandfather, and then like a lot of my cousins and your aunts definitely too, right? So what was sort of like just growing up around all of that really good home cooking like?
I think for me, I was always in awe, like watching everybody cook. Like seeing a big pot of food for me, that was the exciting thing.
Yeah.
Seeing somebody stir a pot, as simple as that is, that was always exciting because I knew something good was to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I really picked up on all of the different ways to cook things and the different dishes that we do make.
Yeah. And you got into the kitchen really young. Like do you remember how old you were? You must have been like probably 8?
Yeah. So when I first made like a meal by myself alone in the kitchen, I was 8 years old.
Yeah. Do you remember what that meal was?
It was actually roti and fried bacon.
Nice. And do you remember like how it went and how it tasted? Was it pretty smooth?
It went pretty smooth. When I first started making roti, it used to come out pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you just always had the touch.
Yeah, just to practice.
Was your roti always round?
Not in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It in the beginning it was a little misshapen, but now they're definitely round.
I feel like that's normal.
Yeah.
So, being able to share all of these recipes isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world because, especially in our culture, when you talk about anything, a lot of it isn't documented, but especially food and recipes, a lot of it is just passed down through families. So, of course, there's lots of different, like, unique ways that I'm sure people do things. But for you, you've had to go ahead and, like, actually be the first person to document a lot of these recipes, right?
Yep.
What has that been like?
Sometimes it's pretty difficult because I'll call my grandmother on the phone and I'll be like, well, how do you make this dish? And then she'll tell me you add a pinch of this, a touch of this, you throw a handful of this, and it's really difficult. So a lot of the recipes that you see that I put on my channel, it's like trial and error for me. I'll have to practice it before I can post it for anyone who wants to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to go ahead and measure like this and see how much flour to put in this or whatever. And I definitely practice before I put it up because I don't want to give people something where they have to like think too much about it. Because I feel like a lot of Guyanese cooking, it can be a little daunting for people when they first begin.
Definitely. And I mean, you're pretty much like a test kitchen in that way, in functioning in that way. And I guess a lot of people don't realize it, but when you get a recipe from like a magazine, whether it's, Bon Appetit or like a Food Network person or their website, that recipe has been tested by a bunch of people a bunch of times before they decided to put it online and share it with you.
Yep.
And that's for the same reason that you're saying, to make sure that every time that another person does it, it actually comes out well. Mm-hmm. What has that trial and error been like? Because I'm sure for you, like, not just before you put it on YouTube, do you have to figure out that trial and error of just like amounts and stuff like that? But just figuring out like how do you perfect your YouTube video and sharing a recipe? What was that like?
So sometimes I'll get lucky and I'll try it for the first time, and it'll come out perfect. But then sometimes, of course, you have those dishes that are a little more tricky, and it'll take like a few times before you can actually like post it for like the world to see, I guess. It's a little frustrating sometimes, not gonna lie, because you see your grandmother, your aunts make it so effortlessly, and then you're like, well, why isn't it coming out? But some of the foods definitely take a lot of practice, and I tell people like if they follow my videos, sometimes it doesn't come out well. I just tell them you need to practice. That's all it is.
What's been one of the most difficult recipes?
So, one of the most difficult recipes, but also one of the best recipes I feel on the channel was the roti recipe. A lot of people want to make it because it's like quintessential to a lot of our dishes. Like you can eat it with anything. So, for me, obviously, it's easy. I just put it up. I know how to make it. But for somebody who like just starts out making it, it can be very daunting. So I posted one video, and that wasn't really totally in depth. But then recently, about a year ago, I posted another one, and I made it like a 20-minute long video. So now people are like, wow, now I know like all of the tips and tricks on how to make it.
Nice. Yeah, because I guess, when you look at like your grandma or aunts and even parents and whoever generations before you that have perfected these recipes, like they've perfected these recipes throughout their entire lives, or however long they've been cooking, and everyone like puts their own personal spin on things, so everyone like ends up having their own unique tips because I think none of this stuff is written down.
Yeah, that's true.
What have some of like the biggest learnings been for you since sharing this stuff with other people?
So my biggest thing is I always try to tell people, especially any young people who do watch the channel, I try to tell them that if you have your grandparents or if you have like elder aunts or uncles, like, and they know how to cook or know how to make certain things, soak it all up now, because the sad reality is that like sooner or later they're not going to be here. They're not going to be here forever to show us how to do these things. So I feel like it's our job to really take it in so this way we can carry on these traditions, because it's really our job. It's the younger generation's job, and it leaves with us if we don't continue it.
Absolutely. I think right now in our community you're seeing a lot of archival projects and really, an effort to document our history, and that's extremely important across the board. And I think with that, lots of people immediately you would just think of histories, okay, that means things like artifacts and documents about immigration and things like that, but what you're doing is documenting our history in a very tangible way as well, and that's through our food, and you're documenting our history, our culture also. Can you talk about more of that aspect of what your YouTube channel has been like? Because just from observing, I can see that it's very much a two-way channel in the way that you're not just sharing out your recipes and people will use them and, then you're in people's home by them making your recipes.
Yeah.
But you get feedback from a lot of these people. You get lots of questions and comments. Can you talk about what the community that you've built has been like?
So there's a lot of supporters, but with the supporters comes a lot of haters. I feel like in general in the Indo-Caribbean community, like there's so many different ways of doing things, and I wouldn't say that Caribbean people are judgmental. I wouldn't go that route. I would more say that since there's so many ways to do things, a lot of people think, well, my way is the right way. You can't do this like this. But I always try to tell people in my videos now that I've learned that, because that's definitely something I've learned over the past 2 years, is that everybody has a different way. I'm just showing my way, so this way maybe I can help somebody who has no idea. If you have an idea and you want to like twist my recipe a little bit or twist my video a little bit, feel free to do so if it works for you.
Yeah, because it's just a recipe also at the end of the day. Great. So also, what have like some of the relationships that you've been able to form through your channel? What have those been like?
It's really really good, because there's a lot of people that you meet online and you've never met them in person, but they somehow become your family. Like I tell people who subscribe to my channel or like view my channel, like they are part of my family as well, because without them watching the videos, I wouldn't have really a channel. I could post the videos, but I need people to watch them and try out the recipes and give me the feedback. And to hear like the comments from some people, like that's why I say like you need to soak up what your grandparents or aunts have for you right now because they might not be here. I see so many people coming to my channel and saying, you know, I'm so glad you posted this parsad recipe or this roti recipe because, you know, my grandmother died like 15 years ago and I haven't had this dish since, or I've had no idea how to make it. And not only does it make you a little sad, but it makes you really happy and grateful that you have that in your life and that you got to share it with them, so this way they could be able to do it themselves.
Absolutely. And with that, like, what have you been able to sort of, I guess, learn about your family through doing this? I mean, because a lot of the videos, and I think increasingly, like, you're including a lot more of our family in them. So what has sharing that been like? What have you learned?
So there's always been a lot to learn about this family. There's a lot about us. But definitely some of the dishes that like my grandmother will make, I never paid attention to certain ones. So like now when I'll see her make it, it'll be like, oh wow, I didn't know you put that in. Same goes with my aunts and my uncles. Like I didn't know they put certain things in certain dishes. Even the religious videos that I'll post just showcase that part of our culture. I didn't realize there's so many different moving parts into some of these religious services until like I started doing my own, or I started posting the videos and learning more about it to teach other people.
While we're still sort of talking about the food side of it, you know, with sharing these videos, it's a lot of these recipes are just home cooking, right? And they do require that trial and error. But a lot of these, because the recipes aren't traditionally documented, you're not, of course they're Guyanese recipes because we're Guyanese, but a lot of them are the first time that a West Indian recipe has been documented for the larger community. And I think, you know, when you talk about people having very unique ways that everyone does things, that becomes even more complicated when you're not just talking about just that one country. Can you talk more about that? And maybe, you know, have you been more open to practicing recipes from other cultures, like even Trini recipes and things like that?
So after starting the channel, after making some of the recipes like that Guyanese people would traditionally make, I do have a few Trini friends like that have their own YouTube channels, and just by watching them or like forming that relationship with them, you see that there's so many similarities. So like there's an herb, it's called culantro. The Trini people, they call it like shadow benny. They will say like, you know, that's like the quintessential herb for anything. I started using that in my cooking. Now, are there Guyanese people out there that judge me for it? 100%. But I feel like whenever you're making any type of recipe, it's all about trying different things. The way our ancestors made it, yes, that was like the right way, I guess. But traditional. Yeah, I wouldn't say right way actually. But it's always nice to try new things because you never know what taste might suit you better, or your family better, or your friends better.
Definitely. Have there been other than the culantro, or shadow benny, have there been other recipes that you've found from other cultures that maybe you prefer the way that they make something versus the Guyanese version, or, you know, our family's version?
Let's see. I wouldn't say like I prefer the entire dish or method of making it. I think like the little moving parts that go into it, I'm like, well, that might work a little better here. Like this ingredient might taste a little better here. Like, so I think it's just like little stuff like that. I don't think I would switch our whole entire recipe.
Yeah. So one thing that I think that is not the most interesting, but one of the things that I think that's just really awesome about you and when you've started your channel is at what age you started it at. You know, you don't see many young men in our community that are interested in cooking, and to be so willing to like put yourself out there publicly, period, but also to put yourself out there cooking and sharing your recipes, I think takes a lot of courage. So like that's, you know, hats off to you. But can you talk about like what was it like starting this YouTube channel at how old were you? Were you 16? 17.
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, that's not that uncommon for someone, you know, your generation. That's pretty common for people to have YouTube channels or Instagram pages where they're putting themselves out there. But what was that like of just sharing cooking and being yourself?
So at first it was very nerve-wracking because I feel like a lot of people in general, they will put it out there like, oh, like a guy cooking, like you don't have any authority, like. But I feel like it took me a good year to get comfortable in front of the camera and to be myself. Like if people were to watch my first video versus like my most recent, I'm so much more like comfortable and like just like loose in front of the camera. Before, like I was very, very stiff. Like I did not know how to communicate through the camera. Like it was very rough. It just takes comfort, and just as with anything, it takes practice.
Other than, or I guess in your practice, what were some of the things that you did to make yourself more comfortable?
Just kept making videos
Yeah.
because having a lot of takes in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Because there's been many times where like I've had to go over like 10 times to make an intro for a certain video because it just was not coming out right.
Yeah, and I think in anything that you do, that's definitely the case. I have to say with the podcast, it's the same thing. I mean, I think I remember doing the trailer probably a good like 10 times before getting just one good version. What were there certain things that you noticed that you were doing in your earlier videos that you were just like, oh man, I gotta stop that?
There was a period of time where in the videos I would say like, sometimes I'll still do it actually. It'll be like the same thing. Like if I switch to a new scene, I'll be like, and now guys, or guys. Like I'll always repeat that word. And sometimes I'll watch it and I'll be like, Matthew, you need to stop. But like it takes practice.
Yeah. And everyone kind of has those faults. Like I know for myself, it's which I, even as, you know, I've had to publicly speak just in my career professionally for a while.
Yeah.
And I've definitely cut out like the likes and the ums and things like that. But when it comes to the podcast, you just hear yourself saying it so much more. So I know, there I go again. But so in addition to the food side of your channel, you know, it's not just food that's the cultural aspect that you share. You share a lot about religion too, because that's also something that you're passionate about, right? Can you kind of talk about the role that religion plays in your life and how it relates to food for you?
So if you're Guyanese and you practice Hinduism, I think Hinduism in general throughout the world, it does revolve around food as well, because a lot of the offerings we make are food offerings. Growing up, I feel like those recipes were a little more special to me just because those are things that you really don't see nowadays unless you're practicing it. And it's less widely seen. For me, again, it's like a lot of people nowadays, if they go to do a prayer service by themselves, they have no idea where to start. So I feel like sharing that on my channel, like there's been some people that have told me like, oh, well, I've had this prayer service. I've had to have people come help me make everything before. And I remember I had one lady in particular, she said, this year I didn't have to call anybody for any help. She did it all by herself. And that was really fulfilling because to have somebody learn just from like one of your videos, something that you put out for them, like that was very cool.
Yeah. And where did you learn that stuff? Because again, that's not being documented, right? So where did you go and find those recipes or details about practices?
So what I hear from my aunts and my grandmothers, that a lot of those recipes did come from my great-grandparents, your grandparents. So they passed it on to my grandmother, who passed it on to like, you know, her siblings and then her kids and their kids and so on. So like that's the way I learned how to make it.
Yeah, and then again, that trial and error too, right? Of just figuring out, okay, they might say it's a pinch of this, but it's actually a little bit more, a little less.
Yeah, definitely.
And so as you've now progressed with your YouTube channel, you've also have, you know, gone out and done things on your own. You know, it's not just that you're at home making these YouTube videos or that you're practicing recipes all day long. You've since started college, right? What has that been like in also maintaining the channel? I think, you've definitely shared it with your followers that you've now moved on to school, but you're still making recipe videos.
Yeah.
So how have you kept it up?
So that's the biggest question from a lot of people. They're like, well, how do you do that when you're a full-time student? Well, when I'm home, like on any break, like if I go home for a weekend or, you know, winter break, whatever it may be, I'll record as many videos as I can and I'll save those videos. For me, it was important to, when I went to school, to not stop the channel because I've seen many YouTube channels before to where like something happens in their life, which is understandable because life does happen, and they just like disappear from the internet and you're like, that connection you formed with them through their channel is like, it's gone. It's like, well, where's the person? So I felt like I owed it to like the viewers and anybody who does watch the channel to keep it going. So like I try my best, and I say if you enjoy what you're doing, like it'll come easy. You'll make it fit.
And so not just, I guess, how do you stay motivated, which it sounds like, you know, you're just passionate about it and that helps, but how do you continue to find things to put in these videos? Do you ever feel burnt out about, you know, finding new recipes?
Not really. I think it's pretty early in the channel now, like it's only been 2 years. There's a lot more recipes and spins off of recipes I think that will come. I feel like when I hit like the 4 or 5 year mark, that's when it's gonna get a little rough because
Mm-hmm.
there's only so many Guyanese foods that we can make. But I think that would be a good time and like a little bit of a challenge, but it'll be a good challenge to start to make spins off of everything, modernize everything just a little bit, make
Yeah.
it more like applicable to the younger generation.
Yeah, and I'm sure like with those spins too, you could also find maybe healthier versions or
Mhm.
cholesterol friendly versions, as like that's a huge issue in their community too.
Definitely.
Also in terms of just like finding new things to post about, so you've also started to include more like I guess Guyanese Chinese type of recipes, but also more like American foods too.
Yeah.
What has introducing that type of stuff been like? How have your followers received just like things that aren't traditional Guyanese food?
So the people who like are always watching my channel, like the ones that I usually get the comments from, like I know who they are. They really like them because they like the little spins off of everything. There's some people now that they don't really appreciate it as much. They don't say like they don't hate on the videos, but I'll see it in the views. Like the American recipes, they'll get much less views than like the traditional recipes do. Which is understandable because I feel like if they're coming onto my channel, they're coming on for a certain purpose. But I like to switch it up just a little once in a while to relate to everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, you know, like maybe some of the more American recipes, like if you're looking for, I don't know, what's an example of one of your American recipes?
I've done something as simple as like chicken noodle soup.
Yeah, so like if someone's looking for chicken noodle soup, you know, there's going to be more than a million versions that you can find on the internet. But if someone's looking for just roti, there's probably going to be just a handful of them, and yours is probably going to be like the #1 video. But I also think as people, you know, just to get to engage with you a little bit more and continue to engage with you as a cook that they can trust, and as someone who's putting out recipes that they can trust, I think that it's just valuable that you are a young brown man that's doing these things. And so even if there are a million chicken noodle soups, there's probably only a handful of them that are coming from people who look like you. So that level of trust that you're building is just going to be with a different set of people, and I think it'll continue to grow.
That's true.
Yeah. So also with that, and sharing the more American recipes, do you ever do like fusion recipes between West Indian food and more American food?
I don't think so. That's a good question. That's definitely something I do want to do in the future on my channel. I really can't think of any right now that I have on there.
Yeah. How do you plan your channel? Like, how do you figure out what videos you're going to do when, and, you know, what are you going to plan for in terms of like buying ingredients and stuff like that?
So usually when I record a video, that's what we're having for dinner that night.
Mm-hmm.
So like if my sister's having a craving or my mom's having a craving or my dad, like I'll just put it together and I'm like, oh, since I don't have a video, we'll do the recording now. Sometimes I'll just be like, well, I feel like making this or I want to try making this, and then I'll do it. And so it just depends on the situation.
Yeah. You have a great big kitchen of all of your taste testers.
Yeah.
So out of, you know, cooking for your family, what has cooking for them been like? Like what has, you know, having this audience to cook for taught you about your own food and cooking?
It definitely gives you good feedback because your family...
Honest feedback.
Yeah, honest feedback because your family are like your biggest critics, I feel.
Yeah.
They will tell you something's not right. I've had my grandmother eat something that I've made and she's like, well, yeah, no, this is not going to work. I'm like, okay. Needs more practice.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you taken on to also like teaching your mom and your sister and maybe your dad more of these skills?
Yeah. My mom would get upset, but my mom can't really make roti.
Sorry, Benita.
So she's definitely been able to learn a little bit too. So like if there's something she can't make, she can watch the video too. And
Yeah.
it definitely helps.
So one thing that I want to be able to get into about your YouTube channel is, you know, we talked a lot in the beginning about how food in our culture is just so ingrained in our lives and who we are. And, you know, a big part of why I created Tamarind Bredren is to really like delve into the nuances of Indo-Caribbean identity because it is so complicated and a thing that no one's really talked about. So it's hard to, when you go out in the world and you're not existing in Richmond Hill or these enclaves where you're just surrounded by other Indo-Caribbean people and really reassured about your identity, it can be very complicated when you go out into the world, whether it's college, which is where I feel like I went through my identity crisis about being Indo-Caribbean, or, you know, whether it's work where you're not surrounded by people who look like you. identity is a complicated thing. So I wanted to create Tamarind Bredren to sort of like explore that. And through your YouTube channel, I'm sure because it's all about West Indian cooking and Guyanese cooking, that you're naturally doing that too. Can you talk about what role has doing this channel played for you in exploring your identity and like understanding it?
So I'd say the channel, part of it has kept me sane throughout my college experience, because going to college, as you said, there's not many Guyanese people at all. I don't think I've met any. But it as you said, you don't find people that really look like you. So through the channel, like being able to talk with certain people or forming this relationship online with them, and them being able to watch the recipes, I still feel surrounded by like my kind, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Yeah, so you've been able to build this online community of West Indian people and probably mostly Guyanese people who are looking for these family recipes too. So in, feeling like you have this community, what are some of the things that you get?
So I definitely get a lot of good feedback from that. As I said before, like there's so many different ways to do things. Sometimes somebody will tell me a way that they make it, and I always ask for that in the comments. I'm like, why don't you guys give me a tip that you might have on this dish, the way your family makes it? Because I still find it very interesting, like today, to learn that certain people just do things very differently. And sometimes I'll find like, wow, that really works, or that makes it taste better.
Yeah. Has there ever been a recipe that you wanted to make that our family didn't have?
I'm not sure, because our family, between the amount of people that is in our family, we pretty much have everything covered.
Yeah.
There's actually one thing, black pudding. A lot
Really?
of people ask for that recipe, and I don't think anybody's ever made that.
I feel like a Guruin probably
Really?
knows how to make it. I don't know,
Maybe.
but
I
maybe
don't know.
we'll see. We'll figure
find
that
out.
one out. Yeah.
If not, you'll see it on my channel.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm not really craving it. So
Yeah, I don't eat it. So,
Yeah.
but I know a lot of people really love it, and they want me
Interesting.
to post a recipe, but I have no idea.
Yeah. Cool. So one other thing that I kind of want to talk about before we totally move away from like the religious type of videos that you share. Sometimes it can get complicated when you're talking about religion. It's because religion is personal, just like food, it's extremely personal, but I'm sure religion is probably even more sacred, obviously, in the way where I'm sure people might feel like if you're not doing something the right way or the way that they do things, that you shouldn't be sharing it at all.
Definitely.
What has that kind of feedback been for you, especially as it relates to the religious stuff?
So, on a lot of those videos, I wouldn't say it's hate. I feel like a lot more people will be like, well, this way is the way you're supposed to do it, or my priest says this. Well, it's like a lot of the religious aspects of our culture are also passed down by word of mouth. We do have like the books and, religious texts, but a lot of it is just what people have been practicing for years. So the way our family, may set something up or perform a ritual might be totally different from how another family does it. And it's not necessarily the right or the wrong way, because I come from the belief that, God will accept whatever you give as long as you do it with a pure heart. But I just share it because some people really have no idea. They don't know where to start. So by sharing it, I feel like I could help them in just the smallest way.
Yeah. And I think similarly too, like with your recipes, you're democratizing this information, you're making it for everyone. And the same with these like religious things that you also share. Because I think also previously, not just was that information held mostly by men, but it's really hard if you don't live in a place where you can access a pandit or somebody who has that information. So by putting it on the internet, like you're able to provide so many more people a connection with their religion, even if it's not covering the details of how everyone in our community might do something. So what has some of the challenges been with creating this YouTube channel?
It's definitely the judgment that I get from some people, because some people are just not nice about voicing their opinion. But I always tell people too, and because I've been told from other YouTubers or other people on the internet to just not pay attention. You take the constructive criticism as you wish and keep moving forward.
Yeah. What I also want to make sure that we cover is with starting this YouTube channel, like you became a content creator. Like you weren't interested in making videos before this.
Yeah.
So you had to learn all of these skills, and you had to also continue to perfect them.
Yeah.
So what has that been like? Like, what has picking up a video camera and recording yourself, not being behind the camera, been like?
It's tough in the beginning because you're picking up a camera. For me, which was the first time, you have to play with all the different modes, the settings, which angle works best.
Yeah.
You have to make sure you look all right in front of the camera, and
you sound good.
And you sound good, exactly. And not to, only to mention that, but you have to make sure the food looks good. You can't just like record and then just put it up right away. And it also goes into like the editing softwares that you use. Like I had to play around with many different things, and I finally found what works like now for me.
Can you kind of think back to the first days where you were learning this? What was sort of that learning process like? Do you remember like feeling frustrated? Sort of just what were those few first days, months, weeks? Like how long did it take you to feel like, okay, you actually are on the right track?
So I think the whole first year was like a learning curve for me. I would say the first month maybe was the most frustrating, just because I was new to the whole concept of like saving files and editing things and messing with the camera. So when I would save it onto my laptop, like those videos, they take up a lot of space. So I didn't realize that you needed to like get external drives and all of that. So that gets a little difficult. I'm not really a technology person, but again, it's the practice that gets you there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also just goes to show, like, just because you're focused on food and you're not a tech person doesn't mean that you can't figure out a way to use technology to share your passion.
Definitely.
And that whatever it is, like, you have the ability to learn anything. Yeah, and I think that that's also a great lesson for our community overall. Whatever your passion is, like, go ahead and try it.
Yeah.
So, lastly, I'd love to be able to kind of cover just like, what are some things that now that you've been able to become more engaged with the community and sort of be like an influencer and a important like stakeholder and public figure in our community, what are some things that you'd love to see more of in our community?
I definitely just want to see more of the Indo-Caribbean community in general. Like there's a select few individuals that you see on like Facebook or even YouTube, Instagram, whatever it may be. They talk about the religion. Like I do food. Some people do social activism. Some people speak up for the whole community in general. I just like to see more of that because I remember in like 2010 when I first started learning how to use like a laptop, and I would go on YouTube and I would search up like Guyanese things in general. You didn't find much. Now you can pretty much cover all your bases with certain things. And if we see more of that and make it more like, accessible to everybody, I feel like that would be really cool because our culture is definitely one that I feel is dying. And without us to continue it or more people to continue it, like all the different ways of doing things, like you won't see them anymore. So.
For sure. And I think you probably can also talk about how important it is to document these things and translate all of this information to digital mediums. Because you probably know what it's like to not be in a place where you're surrounded by a bunch of Indo-Caribbean people, because you did live in Richmond Hill and grew up in New York, but then you also moved to Florida, and now you are in school where you're not surrounded by Indo-Caribbean people. But still, there are a lot of West Indian people in Florida, and it's the Fort Lauderdale area, right? And there's a ton of West Indian people, especially Guyanese people there, but it's not the same as Richmond Hill. So can you also talk about what that difference has been like?
So growing up in a place where like you don't have that community like readily accessible to you, it's a little tough. So like in Richmond Hill, you can go to Liberty Avenue and you can get whatever veggies you want, whatever, like if you need religious items, you can get it all there. In Florida, like even if you're in an area with a lot of Indo-Caribbean people, like I'd have to go to a select store if I wanted like Bora to cook or something like that. It's tough, but you make it work.
And then also in terms of that, like with, I guess, identity-wise and going to school, like do you feel like there were other people around you that looked like you or at least understood what you were and what it meant to be Guyanese?
Not really,
Really?
to be honest. I've done a lot of explaining to people, and I sort of like that because I like to learn about different cultures too. It's very important to me, like when other people are passionate about their culture, I'm like, well, tell me more about it,
Yeah.
So I find myself telling people a lot about like what the Guyanese culture is. A lot of people might think like, oh well, you guys are Indians, right? I'm like, it's more than that. We definitely have a lot more to us. It's a melting pot of different cultures.
Definitely. The "Are you Indian?" question is, I think, an actual trigger for
Yeah.
me.
Oh no, it is. It definitely is.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. And so now that you have the YouTube channel, do you ever share that with your friends who aren't West Indian?
So yeah, a lot of my like non-Guyanese friends, they do watch the channel. They do. I've had some of them try out some of the recipes. Of course, when I make and recipe test, like I'll share it with them and see their feedback, and they love it. They love it.
That's awesome. And what has either you actively sharing or just the response from people who find your channel, what has the response been from both like the wider Indian diaspora from your channel, if any, but also like the wider West Indian community, so not just Indo-Caribbeans?
Okay, so for like the wider like Indian diaspora, I would definitely some people definitely appreciate it because again, we're like a branch off of them, I feel, in some ways. So they're like, wow, I've never thought about doing it that way because they don't do it that way. A lot of the recipes, they're riffs off of their recipes, but it's just done in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see the differences.
Yeah. What about the West Indian community?
And the West Indian community, I feel like sometimes it's just not as appreciated as you think it would be because again, everybody thinks like my way is the right way.
Yeah. So before we go, is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I hope whoever's listening, I hope you guys go ahead and check out my channel. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Give all the videos a thumbs up, comment, and just let me know what you think and give me your honest feedback because I really want to continue this for, as long as I can.
Where do you see next in terms of either the channel? Do you see it evolving and how, if you want to share? Or like what types of new things are you interested in sharing?
So I've been thinking for a while that I wanted to make a cookbook because, again, Guyanese recipes, Indo-Caribbean recipes in general, you don't see too much of it on the internet, let alone in a cookbook that's like readily available for you to take home. So I feel like that's like the next thing I want to work on.
Awesome. And so there's a cookbook, which sounds like it could be in the immediate future. What about in the not so immediate future? And this doesn't have to be anything that you think could even be a reality. Just like things that you've thought since doing the channel could be really fun.
So I've always thought that like a cooking show like on actual TV would be cool.
Yeah.
A lot of people have always told me like, oh, you're gonna have a YouTube channel one day or you're gonna do this one day, and I told them no, that's not gonna happen. But look now, so you never know what's in the future, what the future will hold.
For sure. Well, we're really excited to see whatever you do next. I mean, you know that like we're all so proud of you, not just for the YouTube video, but everything else that you've been able to accomplish. But thank you so much for coming on this episode of Figuring It Out.
Thanks for having me.